The most familiar samosa could not have existed when the samosa first reached India. Medieval versions were filled with minced meat, nuts, onions, and spice. The potato came from the Andes centuries later. The chile came from the Americas too. Even the name travels backward through Persian and Arabic. Yet calling the samosa foreign misses the real history. South Asian cooks did more than adopt an imported pastry. They rebuilt its filling, changed its crust, fried it for crowded streets, smashed it into chat, paired it with tea, and turned one traveling triangle into a food that millions now recognize as home. Begin with the name, because the name traveled farther than any single recipe. Samosa belongs to a family of words that includes the Persian sanbusag and Arabic forms such as sambusak and sambusaj. Across Central Asia, the Middle East, the Horn of Africa, South Asia, and regions touched by Portuguese Empire, related pastries carry names like samsa, sambusa, samusa, and chamua. That linguistic family is strong evidence of connection. It is not a passport stamp proving that one modern country invented every version. An 11th century Persian chronicle mentions sanbusag. Arabic cookbooks from roughly the 10th through 13th centuries record related pastries with different fillings. Some versions contained minced meat, spices, and nuts. Others could be sweet. Some were fried, related forms elsewhere were baked. One medieval Baghdadi recipe tradition used meat with aromatics such as coriander, cumin, pepper, cinnamon, mint, and almonds. Other versions moved toward sugar or halwa. This range matters because it destroys the idea that the first samosa was one savory triangle waiting for potatoes. The early documentary family was already moving between main dish, snack, and sweet. It also reveals a world in which spice did not mean chile. Cooks created heat and perfume with black pepper, long pepper, ginger, mustard, and layered aromatics. When chile later became so closely associated with South Asian food, it made the earlier palate harder to imagine. The pastry preserved its name while the sensory world inside it changed. The category was already flexible before it entered South Asia. The essential idea was a wrapper that turned filling into a contained portion. Dough provided structure. A sealed edge protected what was inside. The cook could make many pieces from one batch and change the filling according to price, season, faith, and customer. This is why arguing over the original triangle can mislead. Not every member of the family was triangular. A crescent, cone, rectangle, or tetrahedral packet could solve the same problem. Shape depended on dough, cooking method, and the hands folding it. The popular claim that Samosa was named after Central Asian pyramids sounds clever, but it is folk etymology. The documented word trail points more securely through Persian. Persian, however, was more than the language of one territory. It became a language of literature, administration, prestige, and court life across a broad region. A Persian name could travel with Turkic rulers, Arabic recipe collections, Central Asian cooks, merchants, and migrants without carrying one frozen recipe. The ancestor of the samosa was therefore not one object leaving one nation. It was a pastry system moving through a connected world. Stuffed pastry is a simple technology with enormous range. It divides ingredients into portions before service. It places a starch around expensive meat. It protects a moist filling from direct heat. It creates contrast between exterior and interior. And because each piece is enclosed, it can move from kitchen to dining room, market, journey, or work break without requiring a bowl. Portability is often turned into a romantic story about merchants packing samosas into saddlebags across the Silk Road. The broad logic is plausible, the precise image is repeated more confidently than the evidence allows. We do not need an imaginary traveler to explain the spread. Real movement was constant. Courts recruited specialists from far away. Armies assembled people and supplies. Pilgrimage routes fed travelers. Commercial cities contained foreign merchants. Marriage and displacement carried household knowledge across languages and borders. A pastry also travels well as an idea. A cook does not need the original filling. The technique can be reconstructed with local flour, local fat, and whatever ingredient survives heat inside the wrapper. But this flexibility contains labor. Dough must be mixed to resist tearing without becoming leathery. Portions must be rolled or cut. Every seam has to close. A small leak can release moisture into hot fat, break the crust, and contaminate a batch. Repeating the fold hundreds of times turns a familiar snack into skilled manual production. The cooking method changes the business. A baked Samosa can be attached to a tandoor wall or placed in an oven, producing a robust crust. A fried pastry can cook quickly in a vessel of hot fat, making it suitable for batch service in dense streets. Neither method is the universal original. The wrapper is therefore both container and permission. It lets the filling change without destroying the recognizable form. When that form reached the Delhi Sultanate, the record suddenly becomes detailed enough to see what was inside. In the 13th and 14th centuries, Delhi was the capital of a sultanate shaped by conquest, migration, Persian administration, Central Asian connections, and Indian labor and culture. The poet Amir Khusrau lived inside that world. Writing in Persian and Hindavi, he embodied the mixture later historians try to divide into clean civilizations. A passage associated with his era describes princes and nobles enjoying samosas made with meat, ghee, onion, and other ingredients. Then a Moroccan traveler gave us a fuller view. Ibn Battuta reached India in the 1330s and served under Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He described an elaborate court meal in Delhi. Before the rice course came a pastry he called sambusak or samushak, thin dough filled with minced meat, almonds, pistachios, walnuts, onions, and spices, then fried in ghee. This was not the potato triangle beside a paper cup of tea. It was an elite course whose filling displayed access to meat, nuts, clarified butter, and professional kitchen labor. The serving order matters. Court dining made hierarchy visible. Guests received particular foods in sequence. Sweet drinks, breads, meat, rice, pastries, and betel turned eating into ceremony. A filled pastry could demonstrate refinement because the expensive ingredients were hidden until the crust opened. Delhi's cooks did not merely preserve an imported formula. They were working within a new ingredient environment and feeding rulers whose legitimacy depended partly on displaying cosmopolitan power. Persianate names signaled prestige. Indian onions, grains, fats, spices, and kitchen skills shaped execution. The Sultanate itself was violent and unequal. Muhammad bin Tughlaq became famous for generosity, ambition, punishment, and disruptive policies. The feast described by a protected court official cannot represent what ordinary people ate. Its abundance depended on revenue collected from a much larger agrarian society. Nuts sharpened that contrast. Almonds, pistachios, and walnuts concentrated value into a few bites. Ghee required milk, animals, fodder, and processing. Meat required herding, slaughter, preservation, and distribution. Thin pastry required refined flour and dexterity. The court presented all of this accumulated work as effortless hospitality. For a ruler, feeding foreign scholars and officials was an investment. Gifts and banquets recruited loyalty, advertised wealth, and placed guests inside an order controlled by the Sultan. The sambusak was small, but its position in the feast communicated access to an international court culture. That inequality is part of the samosa's transformation. The earliest clear South Asian descriptions come from elite tables because elite institutions generated and preserved texts. Street cooks and households could have made related foods without leaving comparable records. The archive shows us the palace first. It does not prove the palace did all the inventing. Roughly a century and a half later, a remarkable manuscript shows how thoroughly the pastry had entered an Indian court. The Nimatnama, or Book of Delights, was created for the rulers of the Malwa Sultanate at Mandu in central India around the end of the 15th and beginning of the 16th century. It combines Persian text with paintings whose style also reflects local artistic worlds. The book contains several ways to make samosas. Fillings use ingredients such as minced meat, spices, aromatics, and, in some versions, ingredients that could push the pastry towards sweet or rich court food. The very number of methods matters more than any one recipe. By this point, samosa was not a foreign novelty requiring explanation. It was a category worth variation. The manuscript also makes cooking visible. Grinding, mixing, frying, filling, and serving appear as activities performed for a ruler. The patron's pleasure fills the page, while workers turn ingredients into that pleasure. One fact is impossible to miss. There are no potatoes. There are no chilies either. Neither crop was available to the cooks who served the Delhi Sultanate in Ibn Battuta's time. Both originated in the Americas. They could enter South Asian food only after the voyages, conquest, biological exchange, and maritime empires that connected the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and Asian markets after the late 15th century. This is where the timeless national icon breaks open. The medieval Indo-Persian samosa was already being localized, but its famous modern filling did not yet exist. The 16th century Ain-e-Akbari adds another linguistic clue. It describes a related preparation called kutab and notes that people in Hindustan called it sanbusa. Names overlapped. Categories touched. Cooks recognized family resemblance without obeying a dictionary. By then, the pastry had traveled from Persian and Arabic records into several South Asian courts. But its largest transformation would come not from another sultan. It would come from two American plants. The potato was domesticated in the Andes. The chile pepper was cultivated in the Americas. European expansion tore both crops from their original worlds and moved them through systems built by conquest, coerced labor, trade, and empire. Portuguese networks helped introduce potatoes and chiles to coastal India. Their spread was uneven. New crops are not accepted simply because a ship unloads them. Farmers must learn where they grow. Traders must create demand. Cooks must decide what the ingredients can do. Early potatoes remained limited in geography and status. Wider cultivation developed gradually, including under British encouragement in Bengal and hill regions. Different Indian languages absorbed different names. Markets and transport systems had to make the tuber cheap and dependable before a vendor could build an everyday snack around it. The transformation was therefore measured in generations, not one recipe date. No surviving document announces the first potato samosa with a fanfare. Instead, agricultural history tells us when the filling became possible, and later, food practice tells us how completely it won. Chiles eventually transformed South Asian heat. They did not replace every older pungent ingredient. Black pepper, long pepper, ginger, and mustard already mattered, but they offered new colors, intensities, and growing possibilities. Potatoes required another conversion. Colonial officials and commercial networks encouraged cultivation in several regions. The tuber could absorb spice, provide bulk, hold moisture, and remain soft inside a crisp shell. Those properties made it extraordinarily compatible with a fried pastry. The famous combination of potato, peas, onion, coriander, cumin, chile, and other spices was not a return to an ancient original. It was a new South Asian solution created from global ingredients. Vegetarian fillings also opened the snack to more consumers and contexts. Meat remained important in keema samosas, Hyderabadi lukmi, and many regional forms. But potato created a cheap, satisfying center that could be produced at scale and sold without the cost and spoilage risk of meat. That economic advantage should not be confused with inferiority. A good potato filling demands control. Too wet and steam ruptures the crust. Too smooth and the interior becomes paste. Too dry and the shell feels empty. Whole spices, green herbs, sour notes, and pieces of potato create texture that meat and nuts once supplied differently. The Columbian exchange did not make the samosa less South Asian. It reveals how South Asian food is made. Foreign crops become local through cultivation, labor, taste, and repetition. Once potato and chile entered the triangle, the palace snack was ready for a far larger public. Frying turns a sealed pastry into public theater. A vendor can prepare dough and filling before the rush, fold a tray of raw samosas, and fry them in batches as customers gather. The sound advertises freshness. The smell moves farther than a sign. The brown shell gives buyers visual proof that the batch is ready. But fast service rests on slow preparation. Potatoes are boiled, cooled, peeled, broken, and seasoned. Dough is rested, sheets are rolled, cones are formed, seams are pasted shut. Oil or ghee is heated and managed across repeated batches. Temperature determines the crust. Fat that is too hot can blister and brown the outside before the layers cook. Fat that is too cool produces a greasy shell. Vendors learn the behavior of the fire, vessel, weather, and crowd without digital controls. The samosa also found a partner in tea. Under British colonial rule, commercial tea production expanded in Assam and other regions through plantation systems marked by coercive recruitment, harsh labor, and imperial profit. Campaigns later promoted tea drinking within India. The everyday chai break that feels timeless was partly manufactured by modern industry. Plantation tea and street samosa brought two different labor systems into one inexpensive ritual. The cup concealed estate workers who cleared land, plucked leaves, and processed them under severe controls. The pastry concealed farmers, cooks, and vendors. Marketing converted both chains into comfort. Railways accelerated the pairing. Stations created captive crowds with little time. Vendors needed food that could be carried along a platform, counted quickly, and eaten without formal table service. A samosa could survive the wait better than many wet dishes. Tea could be poured to match the pause before departure. Modern transport did not invent either item, but it gave the combination a national stage. Together, tea and samosa solved a social need. They were small enough for a work pause, affordable enough to share, and substantial enough to turn conversation into an event. Railway platforms, college canteens, office meetings, roadside stalls, and political gatherings made the pairing ordinary. Religious and family calendars gave it other meanings. Samosas appear at Ramadan iftars, Diwali gatherings, weddings, funerals, school events, and unexpected guest visits. Meat, potato, lentil, paneer, or sweet fillings let households adapt the form to faith and occasion. Then, chaat cooks broke the package open. Samosa, chaat crushes or splits the pastry beneath chickpeas, yogurt, tamarind, green chutney, onion, spice, and crisp toppings. Portability disappears. Texture multiplies. The sealed object becomes a platform. This is South Asia making the snack its own in the most literal way possible, taking an inherited form, cracking it, and building another dish on top. The standard global image is a large, upright triangle with a blistered crust and potato filling. Travel across South Asia and certainty collapses. In Bengal, singara is often smaller. Its shell and seasoning distinct, with seasonal cauliflower, peanuts, or other vegetables joining potato. The name follows a different route, and local customers do not need an international definition to recognize it. Hyderabad's lukmi is usually rectangular, with a thicker pastry and a meat filling associated with the city's Muslim food culture. Its shape alone breaks the rule that a samosa must be triangular. In Pakistan, keema and potato versions coexist. Cities and shops defend particular sizes, chutneys, and spice profiles. A giant samosa can be a meal. A tiny one can belong to a party tray. In Western India and Gujarat, sweet, lentil, pea, and regional spice combinations expand the category again. Even the crust is contested. Some cooks seek a firm, layered shell with small bubbles. Others use thin commercial pastry sheets for speed. A homemade fold, a factory wrapper, and a bakery crust create different products even when the filling matches. These are not deviations orbiting one authentic deli model. They are evidence that the form survived by allowing communities to solve their own problems. The same principle applies beyond South Asia. but the routes must be handled carefully. Sambusa is deeply embedded in the Horn of Africa and East Africa. Sambusak remains part of Middle Eastern cuisines. Central Asian samsa often enters a hot oven or tandoor. Their histories connect to the same broad pastry family. They do not all descend from the modern Indian potato samosa. Portuguese-speaking chamua traditions reveal another layered route through Goa, Mozambique, other colonial connections, migration, and Portugal. Empire moved people and food in several directions. Local cooks changed fillings again. One family of names can therefore contain foods shaped by courts, caravans, ocean trade, enslavement, indenture, colonialism, and voluntary migration. The triangle looks simple because the roots are hidden inside. In the 19th and 20th centuries, South Asians carried their samosas into another global journey. Indentured laborers, merchants, sailors, soldiers, students, professionals, refugees, and families moved through the British Empire and beyond it. In East and Southern Africa, the Caribbean, Britain, North America, the Gulf, and Southeast Asia, filled pastries entered new shops and homes. Migration did not distribute one standard object. A Gujarati vegetarian shop in Leicester, a Punjabi sweet house in Toronto, a Pakistani iftar in Dubai, and a South African samosa maker work with different histories and customers. Industrial production changed the scale. Frozen wrappers and standardized fillings allowed supermarkets, caterers, and restaurants to sell enormous quantities. Mechanization could cut dough and control portions, but many businesses still relied on poorly paid hand-folding labor, often women working in homes or small workshops. In Britain, the snack could signify South Asian community and also become ordinary supermarket food. In the Gulf, it could cross between South Asian and Arab naming traditions. In parts of Africa, it entered places where sambusa lineages already existed, making any simple story of India exporting the form inadequate. Global recognition did not erase local genealogies, it made them overlap. Diaspora shops also translated the snack. Vegetable pastry on a label made it legible to unfamiliar customers. Cocktail-size pieces fit catering trays. Oven-ready frozen packs shifted the final cooking into the consumer's kitchen. Each change altered texture and labor while keeping the triangle recognizable. The economics repeat an old pattern. Consumers see a compact, inexpensive snack. The low price hides time, peeling, chopping, seasoning, folding, sealing, frying, cleaning, transporting, and selling. New fillings keep appearing: cheese, noodles, chicken tikka, pizza flavors, chocolate. Purists treat them as proof of decline. History suggests the opposite. The medieval category already held meat, nuts, and sweet fillings. The ability to absorb a new center is not a modern corruption. It is the pastry's oldest survival mechanism. So, is the samosa Persian or South Asian? Its name and medieval documentary ancestry lead through Persian and Arabic. Its Delhi and Malwa records show an Indo-Persian court food built around meat, nuts, onion, spice, and ghee. Its potato and chili form could only emerge after violent global exchanges brought American crops into Asian soil. Its public identity was then made by farmers, cooks, vendors, households, tea stalls, railways, celebrations, and migrants. Origin is one layer of that answer. Ownership is another. South Asia did not make the first stuffed pastry. It did something historically larger. It transformed a traveling pastry so completely that an imported ancestor became a language of home. Break open the modern samosa, and the evidence is visible. The crust remembers a journey. The filling proves the journey never stopped.